Oh, yeah. You know, I don't watch it. Yeah, it's like, this is what Dan did at my. Dan, you got some more papers?
Just that stack there. Do we need more?
This is the back. Let's see.
Oh, no, did you?
Share.
Oh, okay. Oh, please. Oh, my God. Yeah, I appreciate you. That forward. I must have the one in the top, but I wish you.
It should say double true destination.
Yes, I got it. Maybe it's the one you have.
Yeah. Well, you know.
You can share it with me.
Well, maybe. Yesterday.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, you know, kind of starts at. He couldn't go.
Well, it's not getting. Well, it's too bad that and here and Ethan has really got to get them to help us take all the boxes. So that, if you're feeling good tonight.
Feeling strong, Zach?
How's your muscles tonight? Tell John.
I'll be right back. I gotta do some photocopy.
Oh, no, I can print. I don't have to do full copy. Yeah. But does that stuff have? What do you want to talk about? Yeah. Yeah. Also.
She is.
That's something like, you know. Yeah.
It's not.
How many copies do we need?
You know, you.
Okay, I'll just do two then.
Thinking that way, that, you know, see a lot of time you're gonna be. That's pretty much full.
You know, I don't really know. She said.
How many meters?
Her words were, like a small fire was started on. And then he kind of get from the white. And it was, I don't know what that. So, concept.
Yes. That's all, that's.
We're just.
Yeah.
Be discouraged for a while, but then. Yeah. And that is one.
Oh, I think so. So you do like. Both of those
Yeah, well,
stuff?
it's not.
No, they don't.
Take it one step.
That's a column. Yeah, that's fair. Pretty much. Yeah.
So when does it also?
Yeah, sure.
But it's always good. Because she's always.
At least it was.
Like she managed.
I saw her some.
And,
Probably last quite a while. Yeah, I gave him one.
But I thought. And maybe this is probably not trying. So she will.
What was the talk? Was it up there?
Great. Yeah.
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 No, that's it.
Yeah.
That's. Yeah.
You just don't have to say.
Yeah, no.
I wonder.
Is there not? I did.
Hi, hey, hello, guys. Yeah, I can't believe. That, I must leave that for, I know this. Yeah. Balance, oh my word. Why are you late? That's why I'm funny. Oh, that's okay.
I packaged it.
Wait till you see Dan's.
Oh,
Oh, that's what I saw. Wonderful. Guys.
This is handing out.
Oh my God, I haven't had this so good fighter. Well, no, sure, yeah. Oh, and so. Is that awesome?
thank
You
you.
must know that we still have these original potato heads in our house. You can still have them? Yes, kids come and play with them. Oh my God, oh, they're the greatest toys ever. Thank you. Oh, yeah. I love that. It's super cool. Oh my goodness. Oh, well, it's right on. Wow.
With,
So that is really great. Thank you so much. So, thank you.
Oh, my goodness.
okay.
No, there you go. Those are great. Mine. Ah,
There we go.
who's you?
That, well, here for now. Well, thank you, Steins. A little bit of Valentine treat. As I was talking to a single lady today, and I said, I hear you have a new boyfriend. He's in another nation. She said, yes, imagination. All right. Just to let you know, Doug had mentioned that you can't always hear the conversation with just the mic that's in front of me. So I switched back to the area mic. So that little disc that looks like a little orbit thing on the table. And I checked this afternoon. I walked into all the corners and speaking even at a low tone, not my normal nursing home voice, but it picks up. So that if you are having a discussion tonight, it probably will pick up. So that's, I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but that is the reality, just so that people who are watching us online can feel they're more involved and pick up on your insights and your understandings to things. So that is a little bit of a shift. All right, I want you to think of, that hurts already, I know, think. I want you to think of an answer you got for a problem as a child that satisfied you as a child, but does not satisfy, and did not, or would not, or could not satisfy you as an adult. So there was an issue, and somebody said, they gave you a simplistic answer, you went, oh, but as you grew, you realized that answer wasn't satisfying, and you sought out a different answer. Does that make sense? You think of something?
When you ask me, why did I do that? And they say, because I said so.
Right, and that should be enough as a child. But as you get into adolescence and later life, you want to go, really, why? Yeah, exactly, good example. Anything else?
My sister told me that we feel like the hairs on our arm, which didn't make sense, but I thought in your head should really be sensitive.
Yeah, all the hair on your head should be.
So I believed her for longer than I should have.
But your empirical side came out.
Eventually I did.
Yes, good. Yeah, that's a good example, right? We get a simplistic answer that, oh, okay, that sort of makes sense. Anybody else? An answer that satisfied you as a child, but would not or it does not satisfy you now.
You know what a roll box is? The area?
Yeah.
I convinced my younger sister that they actually come out of the water this way. Bring themselves into a pickle.
So they put a pickle on a hook and the fish wraps itself around the pickle.
Nice.
That's
Pretty clever.
yeah. I thought. When I was little, I thought Plymouth Mouse had mice in it. because, the Mennonites were so poor that is that how you pronounce it, Plumos? Yeah, that they were so poor they actually ate mice. But then I realized it was just dried fruit later on. But I was led to believe that we were eating mice meat. Yeah. All right, anybody else? I don't want to stretch this too far, but I just wanted you to think in that area.
I can't think of an instance, but I think of sometimes when we were little in Sunday school and some of the Bible stories that we were taught were very simplistic. And then as you get older, you realize the depth of them. Wow.
You'd almost think that I fed her that answer. That's the direction this conversation's heading. So 38 years of being together, she figured out. Yes, I think very often, maybe not one of the reasons, but part of the reason why adolescents or young 20s walk away from their faith is because they're fed simplistic answers. In Sunday school, those are the answers we give to 6, 7, 8, 9, 12-year-olds. Then they get into their college years, their university years, and they're beginning to think more complex. And those childish answers don't satisfy anymore. And we don't take the time to teach people, or they don't take the time to investigate. I'm not going to put the onus on either side, but to actually dig out the deeper answers. And the purpose of Bible study is not to give you simplistic answers. It is to force us to dig so that we can have substantial answers to substantial questions. The question of the injustice of God, of the seemingly, if God is all powerful, why is there evil in the world? The moral problem of evil. These issues of what happens in our soul, what is this whole process of regeneration? Who is all these things? I think they need substantial answers because they are reasonable and substantial questions. So the purpose of studies like this is not to have the be-all and end-all and final answer, but to provide a substantial answer and then to give you the tools so that you can dig for more substantial answers. Last night at Elders, we're working our way to the Alliance Statement of Faith, and our Statement of Faith begins with the Trinity. And it's interesting that our Statement of Faith begins with mystery. That it's actually not a rational, the doctrine of the Trinity is a revealed doctrine. It's not something we experience in nature. It's something that has to be received by a degree of faith. And it is ultimately just a mystery revealed in history. And I like that our faith begins with a mystery, and then it moves into some rational things after. But it doesn't start with this perfectly rational doctrine of, it's like one God, 3 persons, 1 essence. If they walked into a room, I don't know what would happen. But we believe that God is 1 substance and 3 persons. And we can do all these models, the egg, the chicken, the whatever. And they all bear an element of truth, but ultimately there is a truth there that is beyond our comprehension. And so there's some satisfaction. We can go to the history of the answer to that question. We can find some parallels in nature, and we can show it revealed in Scripture, but ultimately there's a mystery there. So we kind of dig and move through, but there are moments we move into mystery. So we are looking at probably one of the most complex issues in Scripture, and that is the nature of human will. In your experience, in your own life, do you feel you exercising your will on a day-to-day basis? Do you feel yourself making choices? Yeah, absolutely, right. We exercise our will all the time. And so there's this inherent sense we have. But have you ever been in a place where you felt your will was out of your control? Yeah, if you've ever struggled with addictions or been in love or whatever, you kind of feel like you're, what's that, Doug?
The elevator.
The elevator, yeah. The weather. But there are times like we make choices and we go, I think that choice wasn't a free choice. That choice was so influenced by society or culture or, the world around us. I always find it liberating when you meet someone who's like free from social pressure. I was thinking, if I was free from social pressure, how would I dress in leader? Probably not as conservatively as I dress right now. Probably a little more on the edge of
Try it out sometime. Next Wednesday.
I'll borrow Christina's pink Barbie jacket with the long fringes. Often our will is under the influence. So we have this experience of will, but we also know that will is often shaped by, what are the forces that shape our choices in the broadest terms? Society, absolutely. The pressure of society. Our fears often shape our choices, sure.
Rules, regulations, laws.
Absolutely, yeah. Many of our choices are regulated legally by the rules around us. And those can be social norms or they can be political actions. Yeah, good.
Your upbringing.
Yeah, fundamentally. The Soviet argument was give us your children until they're 6, and then you can have them after that. Because we will shape them. And after that point, they will.
What's interesting, when we used to go visit Sherry when she was in Toronto or wherever, and Danny would come with his color shirt.
Yeah.
Where did we go walking downtown in the malls and just like, Janet, you're the only one that's like that here. Like,
Exactly.
it's something that was so different.
Yeah, yeah. That was so normal at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden she realized how different we were.
I talked to Daryl about when he went to Seoul, South Korea. Here he is in his Wranglers and his pearl button shirts, and didn't have a hat on, but the big bucket. And he realized that something not like the rest of the things around.
One of us is not.
Yeah, one of these things is not like the other. So this issue, and then of course there's a whole debate about how we influence people's will, whether it's advertising or marketing or social norms. So the whole debate about the human agency. Who was the guy who put his kid in the box? The light slate experiment. Put his daughter in a box for, that wasn't Kinsey. Oslo? No. Anyhow, we wrestle with this idea of our will, how it works, and then you throw into that God's will and how it works. And so we're actually addressing kind of a fundamental question of how do we function as human beings? How do we exercise our will? How do we discipline, train, all that kind of stuff? So we are working through two of the most complex verses in the New Testament, and we will be through it tonight. And I promised Donna the preacher would not go too long tonight, but it all depends on just a minute more. Sometimes I'm like, oh, just 2 more minutes. All right, we just have a review. Let's read again Romans 9, 22 to 24. Joyce, you got a nice loud reading voice, the mic will pick you up.
What if God, choosing to show his wrath and make his power known, bore with great patience the objects of his wrath prepared for destruction? What if he did this to make the riches of his glory known to the objects of his mercy, whom he prepared in advance for glory? Even us, whom he also called, not only from the Jews, but also from the Gentiles.
Good, thank you. If we read these verses looking for an answer, we will find it. That's called eisegesis. You pull ideas out, or you bring ideas to it looking for an answer, rather than reading it and trying to figure it out backwards, right? And this passage is often used as an argument that God chooses some people for wrath and chooses some people for glory, that people have no choice in the affair, that God prepares some for destruction and he prepares some for advance for glory. That's called double predestination. That make sense? I would argue that that is not the case, because that is reading into the text. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, we did the whole thing about polygamy, right? You can prove from scripture that you can read. If you're looking for something, you'll find it. But at a simple reading, it does appear that way, that God prepares some for wrath and destruction and others for that. What is this chapter or these chapters about? What's the big picture of these chapters? Mercy, good, which feeds into the character of God. This is about what is God's character. And what were they accusing God of? Injustice, not keeping his promises, being unfair. They were accusing him of, it was character defamation, right? Slandering his character. So Paul was defending the character of God. And he's defending it on the basis of the Jews who kept the law, the Gentiles, what do they have to do? Just have George Michael.
Great.
Thank you, Donna. You got to have
Dates me.
faith. Yeah. The Gentiles just have faith. And the Jews were angry. We have to keep the law. How can they not have faith? And how come they get to be Jews if they haven't kept the law? So that's the background. All right. So we looked last week at the very first, 2 weeks ago, at the very first one, prepared for destruction. And it means, we won't go through it all again. Let me wrap it up in the summary on the next page. If you have the notes, I'll just read the summary again to lay the foundation of the next paragraph, or the next sentence. Remember, the context of this is about God's justice. So the charge is, it's not fair that the Gentiles get to be children by faith, not the law. And here's what Paul writes, and this is the expanded version. People, by their own actions and choices, have prepared themselves to ruin their own lives. Think about that. People by their actions and choices prepare themselves to ruin their own life. Is that a fair statement? People by their actions and choices prepare themselves to ruin their own lives, right? Fair? I'm checking with my psychologists here. To some degree? Okay, you want to expand that idea or thought?
What was the question again?
Is it true that people by their own actions and choices prepare themselves to ruin their own lives? Lay the foundation of destruction.
There's stuff that happens to people that's beyond they're just truly victims of the circumstance.
Absolutely. And that would, we would never disqualify that. The classic example is the person who doesn't put their own seatbelt on, right? They, by their own choices, have prepared themselves for destruction. Does that make sense? Yeah, I agree, Shai. This is a far more complex issue than I'm simplifying it, but to some degree, the choices we make would certainly influence the outcome of it. Not withstanding addiction issues and far deeper issues. I don't want to minimize it. All right. And God, here's the beauty of this path. This is where the good news gets in. And God could have easily demonstrated his wrath and make his power known by just punishing them. You did bad, therefore I'm going to let you have the consequences of your actions. But he did something else. He gave them mercy. Here's what Paul says. You say that God's not fair. All we need is faith. I'm glad he's not fair. I'm glad he has chosen mercy. Otherwise, we'd all be in trouble. He did so people could see the rich glory of mercy. So even though people have made choices that should result in destruction, ultimately, Paul says, no, what God has done is he has chosen to give mercy instead of justice. So the Gentiles they deserve justice. The first 2 chapters of Romans. Paul says, I have wonderful news for you. Even though the Gentiles deserve justice, what do they get? Mercy. Because at the root of God's character is he's merciful. So wrath makes power known, mercy makes glory known. God has chosen to show mercy to those whose lives were ripe for ruin. I love that. While wrath makes power known, mercy makes glory known. God wants to reveal the heart of himself. And the heart of himself is that he is merciful. We need to kind of root ourselves in that. All right. That makes sense? We're grounded and founded there. So, if they prepared themselves for wrath, that gets rid of one side. Do they have a choice for glory? Verse 23 again, Bonnie, one more time. Verse 23 and 24.
And he did so to make known the riches of his glory upon vessels of mercy, which he prepared beforehand for glory, even us, whom he also called, not from among Jews only, but also from among Gentiles.
All right. And he did so to make known the riches of his glory upon who are the objects of his mercy in this context. Yeah, they both receive mercy. Exactly. People who deserve to be punished, they become the objects of his mercy. So he did so to make the riches of his glory upon these people, which he prepared. All right. Who's the which pointing to? Who is the which? Not the witch, but the which. Who's the which here? Read verse 24. Even us. It's right there. Namely us. Right? And who's the us Paul's talking to? The Gentiles in Rome. Us. And the Jews, because Paul's us, right? Us, all who are Jews by faith. Whom he also called, not only from among the Jews, but from among the Gentiles. We are all objects of his mercy and all objects of his wrath. God could have revealed his power and poured out his wrath on everybody. What did he do instead? Poured out his mercy. The point of this passage is not about predestination, free will. It's about the merciful character of God. All right, let's expand this. All right, here's the word prepared. This is what throws people off, because some people think the word prepared means predestined or chosen ahead of time. So they read this in verse 23, whom he predestined in advance for glory, or chose in advance for glory. Now, here's the fun part. If we go through just about every translation, Amplified, Barclay, the International Christian Bible, or International Children's Bible, that's it. A guy named Woost, a guy named Young, don't worry about the names. They all use the exact same word, prepared. Prepared beforehand. It literally says what it says. He prepared beforehand, made fit in advance. What does prepared mean? Think of all the ways we use that word. To be made ready. Good. For something yet to come. Good. What else is prepared? Just think how you use it in day to day.
Good enough or?
Yeah, it's adequate. It's prepared for what needs to be done. Good. Yeah, that works.
Is it like organizing?
Yeah. Organizing things, preparing for a trip, putting all the pieces together. Good. When we prepare food, what are we doing? We're physically getting it ready, right? This is not a complicated word, by the way. It is exactly what it sounds like. All right. Prepared is only used 4 times in the entire Bible. That makes this trickier. Here, make ready beforehand, which is exactly what Shelley just said. Ephesians 2:10 says, for we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand, or made ready beforehand, that we should walk in them. Now, does that say he predestined us to do them? What does it say? He got them ready for who to do? Us. Right? He got these good works ready. And what good works did God get ready for us to do? All the things he has planned. Feed the poor, visit the widows, look after your neighbor, love your brother. God says, I've got all this good stuff prepared that you need to do, but it's up to you to do it. Here's the ones that help us. In the Old Testament, I don't want to overcomplicate this. Isaiah 28:24 says, so you want to just read it in different translations, and maybe we'll dance a little bit with this. Isaiah 28:24. Shelley, do you have what translation do you have there? Okay, let's read that. Donna, do you have NASB?
I have NASB.
Okay. Isaiah 28:24, and then we'll pick up this one.
Wait,
28:24.
When a farmer calls for fun, he doesn't call continually, does he keep on breaking out and put it in store?
Good. Get your pause there. Donna?
Does the farmer plow continually to plant seed? Does he continually turn and harrow the ground?
Guess which word is prepared? Is that
Continually.
harrowed? All right.
That's the finished work.
Yeah, that's the word. What is harrowing, Dan? Finishing. It's getting it ready. Is it preparing it?
No, it's more finishing the so like leveling.
Okay, well, we'll hold that thought because that doesn't quite fit with this, but it'll work eventually. Wisdom of Solomon. This one helps us the best. All right. You don't have this book in your Bible, but this is the translation. Thou hast commanded me to build a temple upon thy holy mount, and an altar in the city where thou dwellest, a resemblance of the holy tabernacle, which thou hast prepared for the beginning. It was to be a copy of the holy tent that was prepared in the kingdom. All right, here's the word prepared. The word prepared here means fitted by the adjustment of parts. You're preparing a car for painting. You're fitting the parts together, emphasizing the agreement of all the elements that have to be together. So when you prepare a meal, you take all the elements together and you fit them together to make one meal.
Wait, no, the harrowing still works.
Okay, well,
Because
good.
you need to do that in order to prepare the land for it to grow well.
Good, that fits
Danny always
perfect.
says when I harrow and I miss a little part, he said that isn't going to germinate.
Good, this is perfect then. This fits. Okay, good. We're working.
He's like, go around.
Speaking from experience. Here's the key. The word here is used to prepare the soil structure called tilth that is suitable for planting seeds. Tilth is soil suitable for planting seeds. Have you ever used that phrase, Doug? The tilth? The tilth?
I want to hear it this year.
Yeah. It's not a common word, but it's a noun. It's the soil prepared for planting. Tilth is the soil that is fit as a seed bed and by its nature promotes seedling emergence and root penetration. So, it is not the seed. It is the soil that the seed grows in. It is the soil prepared for growth. All right, so take a look at verse 23. What he did this to make the riches of his glory known to the objects of his mercy, whom he tilled.
In advance.
In advance. He has prepared the soil so that his glory could be seen. This is not about salvation. This is about God has prepared lives, and we'll get into more detail exactly what that preparation is, so that his glory could be seen. That sits a little different than the traditional perspective. I love tilth, it's my new word.
How do you spell that?
P-I-L-T-H, the tilth. When you buy peat moss and you get your soil and you mix it up, the product you're sitting in the pot there is called tilth. It is soil prepared for the seedling. So, what is the difference between preparing soil for seed and seeding the soil? Vast, right? They're two different things completely. Tilling and seeding are different. I'm not from the farm, but Doug? Yeah, and that's exactly what the word is using here, is getting ready.
Plus you zero chill. Mostly done now.
Nowadays, so yeah, this illustration will then officially fall apart.
Preparing that nowadays could be like.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, getting the soil ready, in whatever manner. Yeah, we'll have to come up with a new word, but these people didn't have direct seeding.
Regardless, you still have till.
Yeah, you still have tilth, just the way you produce the tilth is different. You're right. Does that make sense, Doug?
Yeah.
Good, excellent, all right. If we were in downtown Calgary, this conversation would not be happening. I have all kinds of thoughts, I'm just shutting them down, like windows being closed. You did. All right, so what is the difference between a life prepared for good works and predestined for good works?
No.
If you're predestined for good works, that means you have to do them.
To physically do something about it.
God is doing the preparing. If we're
You have to
prepared
get
for good
involved.
works, does that mean we have to do them? You don't, yeah, good. You have a responsibility. Do you have to seed once the soil is ready? You should, but some don't, that's right. All right. The word here is prepared or make ready, not predetermined. So 23 reads this. What if he did this to make his riches of his glory known to the objects of his mercy, whom he tilled in advance for glory? That make sense? All right, let me wrap this up. We'll actually wrap up. Look at that, we've all got a couple pages left. At first glance, 22 to 24 appears to indicate that people have no choice. Some are predestined to wrath, some are predestined to glory. But that's not what the text says or what the words mean. These are two different words. First is that the objects of wrath prepared for destruction. The word prepared means ripe or worthy of. Second, prepared is prepared beforehand for glory. Here, prepared means that all the pieces of their lives have been orchestrated or organized so that they could choose or they could glorify God. God makes the circumstances of our life tilth so that seed might grow. Turn to Matthew 13. God has made your life tilth so that you could glorify God. And Matthew 13 is the parable of the four soils. Matthew 13.
We should have a one thing on every Sunday, like this is the word of the week.
Word of the week. Word of the day is tilth.
And some people will.
So Matthew 13 is the parable of four soils. What's the first soil? The weeds. Right. Is that soil prepared for good works? So what are the weeds in that parable? He explains it a little later on. Just look down the passage.
Person fell in half and birds ate it.
Right. And who are the birds? The world, Satan. Yeah. Good. And the weeds are the hardships of life, the deceitfulness of riches, the cares and concerns of this world that choke out the world. So we've got birds, we've got weeds, then we've got rocky ground. Rocky ground are people that are rock hard-headed. And the last one is good soil, right? It's good. It's prepared. He's talking about the people that are in the fourth section, the ones that have good soil. And here's the neat part. He explains in the very passage we've looked at how he's done this. How has God prepared us to glorify him? What good works did God do? How did he break up the soil? How did he prepare the Jews, because that's what he's talking about, Israel, in order that Israel might glorify God? Go back to the beginning of the chapter. Romans, sorry. Let's go back to, where are we at here? I can throw my verse references down here. Here we go, chapter 9, yeah, verse 3 through 5. How has he prepared Israel in advance for his glory? What does it say in 3 through 5? To whom?
He's adopted them.
Good, he's adopted them. Yeah, that's how, the first way he prepared them was by adopting them. So a child who's been adopted, what do? They thank their parents for adopting them, right? They help their parents through their lives. Good, what else has he done? Now we're on the right track. To whom belong the law? He gave them the law so that they could glorify God through the law. Good. The covenants, the promises. Good. You're on the train right now. What's that? Temple service, gave them the temple, all this stuff. In other words, he gave them adoption, glory, covenants, the law, temple services, the promises, Abraham, and Jesus, according to the flesh. Think of all the things he did for Israel so that Israel might glorify God. He gave them the law, he gave them the temples, he gave them the prophets, he gave them Jesus, he gave them the glory, he gave them the covenant, he gave them adoption, so that they might glorify. He prepared Israel so that he gave them everything they could possibly need so they could grow up in glory and glorify God. And he says the same, he says, he has given us everything we need. He's prepared our lives. He's given us all this so that we might glorify him. Now, here's the question. Although Israel was prepared for glory, did they? No, they didn't accept it. Some of them chose to walk away, to rebel, to be adulterers, to worship idols, to abandon the law, to kill the prophets. See what he's talking about here? He says, God has prepared us for his glory. He's not saying that we're predestined for glory. He's saying we're prepared for glory. God has given us everything we need so that we might glorify him.
That opens it up so everybody has a chance.
That's right, Joyce. He has given what we need so that people might, but that doesn't mean everybody chooses to glorify God.
No.
Even if you've got all those things, yeah. Even if the soil has been prepared and you do everything you can, does the soil seed germinate? Not always. You can have perfect conditions. Under perfect conditions, how much of the seed will germinate, Doug? If the conditions are perfect.
Seed and most of it.
Yeah, a good percentage, right? Yeah. But it doesn't mean every kernel does, right? And that's, you see the point here he's establishing? Israel has been prepared for glory. He's not saying predestined for glory. I hope I'm not fighting a battle that's not worth fighting here. But so, how did God prepare? Now, the question, the personal question: how has God prepared your life to glorify Him? Zach gave his testimony at church, right? We said, man, Zach's been through some hard times, but God is glorified through his life. That's probably not the soil you would have chosen, right? Like, oh, I'm so glad I got to go through that. That's great. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Like, no, but that story then glorified. So God has prepared your life for his glory to this day. And I think how many things that we go through, we look back and go, oh, that was horrible. And God says, I'm preparing that for my glory. I'm preparing that. Some of us were raised in Christian homes and we're blessed with a lot of, we had good soil and grew. Others, well, the soil that they were planted in was kind of rocky. Or the soil they were planted in, the enemy worked as hard as he could to destroy. Notice the seed is not responsible, it's the soil, right? And some people's lives have been hard. And the seed has a hard time, but when it does, you think about that hard path. It's like when you walk through the city and you see the concrete and you'll see a flower or a dandelion break through the concrete. And you're going, that little seed must have worked so hard to grow here, and it glorifies God in the most dirty, hard, polluted place on earth, downtown, whatever. It grows this beautiful. I think some people are daisies breaking through the concrete. Other people have been raised in Christian homes and been blessed. They are daisies in a pasture, in a beautiful pasture. Metaphor works. And I believe what he's saying is that Israel, all us who are spiritual Israel, have been prepared for our lives to have one product. That is glory of God. And you think about all that God has given, I think in my own life, all that God has given me so I can glorify Him. You think of the talents, the abilities, the resources you have, that God has prepared you so that you can go through life and glorify Him. This passage is about the mercy of God, preparing our lives for His glory, not whether we're predestined or not. How did He till the soil so it was ready for the seed? The question is, how has God prepared your life for His glory? God in His mercy arranged everything so that Israel would glorify God, and so that we in turn could glorify God. All right, let's wrap this up. We're going to actually be done on time, if not 2 minutes early. First, let's insert the word predetermined, and what do we get? I'll read 22 and 23 again, and I'll insert predetermined. What if God, although willing to demonstrate His wrath and to make His power known, endured with great patience objects of wrath predetermined for destruction? And He did so to make known the riches of His glory upon the objects of His mercy, which He predetermined beforehand for His glory. That's how people read this passage. They read the word predetermined here. I think they're wrong, because that's not what the words say. Here's what the words say. What if God, although willing to demonstrate His wrath and to make His power known, endured with great patience objects of wrath worthy of destruction because they didn't honor Him? That's the first chapter. And He did so to make known the riches of His glory upon those objects of His mercy. He tilled the soil in advance so that the Gentiles and the Jews would grow for glory. That's us, whom He called, not only among the Jews, but also among the Gentiles. He showed mercy to those who were preparing themselves for destruction, and His mercy is demonstrated in those He prepared to reveal His glory, and they're the same people. The same people that were destined for destruction are the ones now prepared for glory. The Gentiles had prepared themselves for destruction, but God had a different plan. He prepared them for His glory. Here's the conclusion. This is that little picture of the guy walking the dog. This is the passage that can easily get away from us if we don't control the dog. If we don't discipline our minds and discipline our study, we can read this passage, I think, to a false end. But as we do the work that you have been willing to do in these last 2 or 3 weeks, I think we can bring that dog under control. And we will find in it not an unjust and cruel God who predestines people to hell, we will find a God who lays the groundwork for mercy, or whosoever will may come. That's why, here's what they thought, that God's people were biological, that the law made you righteous. And the gospel says God's people include all people, Jew and Gentile. And it's faith that makes you righteous. It's mercy that brings you to that place. All right, I know that's a lot. Is that clicking, making sense? I know there's a risk when I kind of just stream of consciousness thought. So what am I trying to say? You want to echo it back to me?
Nobody is predestined for their future, their eternity.
No.
Nobody, God has not done that. He has just given everybody what they need to make that choice.
Yeah, he's prepared for that choice. Anybody else?
Everyone has a choice.
Yeah. Jew or Gentile alike. So what does this passage tell us about the character of God? So, repeat it.
He really wants everybody to make that choice.
He is merciful. That's the thing that they couldn't get around. Because we want God to be just sometimes. It's like we watch the news, or we see what's happening. We go, oh, I just watched a 6-part documentary on the trial of Japan after the war. It took them 2 years. And the Americans wanted revenge. We want the names of every pilot that bombed Pearl Harbor. We want to throw them in jail or shoot them. And the other lawyers came along and said, what we actually want is justice. And then this Dutch guy came along and said, what we need is mercy. We need to show the Japanese people we are merciful and benevolent. And then, because if we show them that we're, wrathful, they're going to push back, right? If we want justice, then we're in serious trouble. He says, because if you want the names of the people that bombed Pearl Harbor, I would like the names of the pilots who bombed Hiroshima. And the Japanese people went, oh, maybe not. The courts. And so they ended up giving was incredible mercy. Of the 21 people that were there, the longest anybody served was 5 years there. So they got their justice. But they demonstrated mercy. And a long story about how Japan responded and ended up loving the Americans because they weren't vengeful people. They were expecting it. So mercy speaks volumes. All right, any thoughts?
It's written in such a way that it's so take it just
Yeah, because the word prepared is a good word. Like it's a great translation, but it's like, what does prepared mean?
If you don't look at that.
Yeah, if you don't kind of spin that word. So, when you prepare the soil, you're not planting the soil, right? If you're prepared for punishment, it means that you've done enough to warrant it. But you're right.
And you're not determining.
That's right. It's prepared, not determined. And that's a very good choice of words, Joyce. Determined. It's subtle, but it's in that subtlety that there is mercy. Any other thoughts, Dan? I can see the gears going.
just we're all prepared so that we can come up with our lives and stuff. If you just go back a few verses and talks about how you're using Pharaoh, he did absolutely terrible things.
Yes. He prepared Pharaoh's heart.
I guess it was prepared.
Yeah, his heart was prepared by his upbringing, his background, his circumstances. Everything in Pharaoh's life prepared him for that moment. And Pharaoh then chose to.
Well, so it was to do what God needed to do.
That's right. Yeah. And, God prepared his life for that moment.
What if you said no?
That's a very good question.
But then also we go to verse 18. Therefore, God has mercy on whom He wants to have mercy. And He hardens.
Exactly. Who does God want to have mercy on? Everybody. But there are times when God uses people, and that's the debate about Pharaoh. So Pharaoh hardened, we find both verses in Scripture. Pharaoh hardened his heart and God hardened his heart. But that doesn't mean God condemned his heart or he just made it hard. You can still react, right? Even, I guess I'm leaning into it, but you're right.
Yeah,
You
so
can
there's still
you can see where there's that sense of, okay, has God hardened that person's heart? Yes, for his purposes. Yeah.
So it's kind of tough to guy.
Yeah, it's tough being the instrument of that. Yeah.
But you still must have been that, wouldn't you?
Oh, well, yeah, Pharaoh was was not a nice person. He wasn't a merciful, kind, benevolent, he wasn't Queen Elizabeth II. Why, people? He was a cruel taskmaster who worshipped Satan. Yeah, exactly. All right, this is about as deep as, from now on, we'll get up for air and we'll move through the book a little quicker after this. But what I wanted you to see is a few, at the heart of it, I wanted you to see the mercy of God is rooted in this book. This book is not about a cruel God who condemns and crashes back and forth. It's a God who pours out mercy, prepares people for his glory by being merciful. At the same time, I want you to see how people can easily misread things. And they look for a defense of something that's not necessarily there. You have to read that into it. A clear reading will take you in a different direction. Construed reading will take you into political, well, not that passage.
And don't you think people that would read it and understand the mercy part, it would make them just desire God more, because it stems from
It makes God beautiful.
want to get beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, the mercy is a beautiful thing. Yeah, would you serve a God who would, condemn infants to perdition, or one who is merciful and prepares lives for his glory? It is a very different picture. All right, I think there's one last page. You have a 6? Okay, then we're done. Oh yeah, 6 says, Paul points out the merciful truth of God's character. Why are you so mad that God is merciful? God was willing to demonstrate his wrath, but instead he chose to be merciful. He tilled the soil of time and history of pharaohs and kings. To the due time when the world was prepared, Jesus would come and redeem and restore both Jew and Gentile. That's the whole part about Pharaoh. Pharaoh was part of the preparation of the world.
Oh.
I should be done now.
But he was
All right, well, we'll call it good there.